All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome to our explainer on the Texas Water Development Board's Draft 2026-27 Flood Intended Use Plan. Look, if you're a local stakeholder, a city planner, or a county official here in Texas, you're going to want to consider this your ultimate playbook. We're going to take a pretty dense administrative document and decode it, turning it into real, actionable intelligence for your community. And honestly, here is exactly why you need to be paying attention. $312,474,540. That is the massive amount of money available from the Flood Infrastructure Fund for Texas communities. We're talking about critical flood mitigation and planning projects over the next biennium. It's a tremendous opportunity, for sure. But to get a piece of that pie, you really have to know the rules of the game. But, before we get completely lost in all the bureaucratic paperwork, let's ground these numbers in reality for a second. We always need to remember exactly what's at stake here, because this isn't just about balancing budgets or filling out the right forms. It's about protecting property, securing vital infrastructure, and at the end of the day, saving lives when the waters rise. This funding is literally designed to prevent catastrophic damage right in your own backyard. So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, the $312 million flood fund. 2, who and what qualifies. 3, the 3 funding categories. 4, navigating the application process. And finally, 5, financing and grant qualifiers. Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, the $312 million flood fund and the significant program changes you need to know about. So if you've applied for this before, you're going to love this, because the TWB has made some major adjustments that are going to save you a ton of time. Most crucially, they have completely removed the benefit cost analysis, or the BCA, from the minimum requirements for flood mitigation projects. That means you no longer have to submit that massive headache up front with your abridged application. They've also capped submissions to a maximum of 2 abridged applications per entity per category. Oh, and they got rid of the predetermined funding goals per category, meaning they're now just going to allocate funds based on the actual requests they receive. Moving right along to Section 2, who and what qualifies. Let's look at the eligibility requirements for entities and projects. First up, the who. The eligible political subdivisions are your usual suspects: cities, counties, and districts or authorities created under the Texas Constitution. But pay really close attention here. If you represent a nonprofit water supply corporation formed under Texas Water Code Chapter 67, your eligibility is highly restricted. You're actually only eligible for financial assistance under the planning category, not for construction. Keep that in mind. Now, the most crucial point is this. Seriously, consider this the absolute golden rule of this entire explainer. Your project must be recommended in a board-adopted state flood plan or an amended regional flood plan, period. If your proposed project isn't already documented in those plans, it is flat out ineligible for this funding cycle. You simply can't just invent a brand new project today and ask the state for money tomorrow. But let's say you are in the plan. What kind of projects are we actually talking about? Well, it's a surprisingly wide net. It isn't just about pouring concrete for massive drainage channels, though, to be fair, that is absolutely included under construction. It covers everything from planning and feasibility assessments up to 30% design to nature-based solutions. We're talking restoring wetlands and building living shorelines. It even covers vital support systems like early flood warning systems and public educational campaigns. That brings us to Section 3, the 3 funding categories. We're going to decode FME, FMP, and FMS. Let's take these one at a time. First is FME, which stands for Flood Management Evaluation. Think of this as your foundational planning stage. These are the broad watershed studies and the preliminary engineering, basically getting you up to 30% design, that you need to figure out exactly what the problem is and how you're going to fix it. However, a quick note. You cannot use FME funds to actually prepare Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, flood insurance rate maps. Next up, we have FMP, or Flood Mitigation Project. This is the action-oriented category, when you are totally ready to move dirt, demolish unsafe structures, pour some concrete, or build out those retention basins. You're operating in the FMP category. It encompasses all the heavy lifting of actual physical project implementation. And finally, FMS, Flood Management Strategy. Honestly, this is kind of a catch-all category for long-term solutions that just don't neatly fit into a planning study or a major construction project. What's really great about this category is that these are often strategies that can be implemented pretty quickly to protect life and property right now.
Think along the lines of public outreach initiatives, regulatory enhancements, entity-wide property buyout programs, or even just installing crossing barriers. All right, Section 4, Navigating the Application Process. Here is your 5-step path to getting that funding. It's really a straightforward 5-step process. Step 1, you just submit an abridged application, which, as we mentioned, is a shorter form that saves everyone a headache. Step 2, the TWDB scores and ranks these applications to create prioritization lists. Step 3, if you rank high enough or to help ensure regional equity, you get an official invitation to apply, which triggers the full detailed application. Step 4, the board makes their financial assistance commitments. And lastly, Step 5, you close on the financial assistance. Depending on if it's a grant or a loan, you'll generally have between 4 and 12 months to close the deal. But remember that big rule change I mentioned earlier? Standard entities are strictly capped at submitting only 2 abridged applications per funding category to make sure funds are distributed equitably across the state. However, there is a massive, incredibly strategic loophole here that you'll definitely want to write down. If you have a project that is using these state funds to match a federal award, it bypasses this limit entirely. No cap.
Which leads us to our final stop, Section 5, Financing and Grant Qualifiers. Let's break down the actual financial payout. So this is where things get really interesting because your local demographics directly dictate how much free money you can get. For planning and strategy, so the FME and FMS categories, you can actually receive up to a 100% grant if your area median household income, or AMHI, is less than or equal to 125% of the statewide average. Now, for heavy construction, the FMP category, the absolute maximum grant is 85%. You reach that 85% by stacking your qualifiers. Having a lower median income gets you up to 75%, being a designated rural applicant adds 5%, and including at least 30% nature-based elements adds another 5%. But what about the part of the project bill that the grant doesn't cover? Well, get ready for a massive financial win for your municipality. Any required local share that isn't covered by the grant can be borrowed from the TWDB at an interest rate of exactly 0%. Let me say that again. Literally 0% interest on your local match loans. It's a fantastic deal. Now, obviously, there are ceilings to all of this. For those heavy construction FME projects, you're capped per application at a $15 million grant and a $30 million loan. Because planning and strategies inherently require a bit less capital, your FME and FMS applications are strictly capped at a $5 million grant and a $5 million loan each. Knowing these caps before you even start applying allows you to scope your projects perfectly within the bounds of what the state is actually willing to fund. Which leaves us with one final, absolutely critical question as we wrap up this explainer. Is your regional flood plan data actually up to date? Because remember, your project's prioritization score relies entirely on that specific data. If your project scope has changed, or maybe the expected benefits have shifted since the plan was first adopted, and you fail to update it with the TWDB, you could severely jeopardize your entire score. And that means you could potentially miss out on your share of that $312 million. So do you know exactly how your current data will be scored by the state? It is time to dive into those TWDB guidelines, check your metrics, and start building those winning applications.